former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
I'm your host, Rich Giardino. Welcome to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. We have a fascinating guest tonight, Jim Tracy. Jim is the author of the book on Robert Garrow, Sworn to Silence, The Truth Behind Robert Garrow and the Missing Bodies Case. Robert Garrow was a serial murderer in the Adirondacks in the early 1970s. It's a fascinating story, and you will find it interesting. Before he wrote the book in 2021, Jim had been a reporter for the Post-Star out of Glens Falls area and had written series and other articles and tracked the Robert Garrow case. He turned his passion for Robert Garrow and his knowledge of the case into this book that you can buy on Amazon, any platform that sells quality books. At this point in time, I'll invite our guest, Jim Tracy. Hey, welcome to the show, Jim. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be with us. I'm looking forward to it. I know a little bit about Robert Garrow, having grown up in Fulton County, and I was a young kid in junior high school when they were searching for him. So tell us a little bit about your background and how did you decide to write the book about Robert Garrow? And then we'll go into the actual murders in the Speculator in Hamilton County, and we'll go from there.
In the summer of 1973, Garrow broke into my father's hunting camp. And we went up there during the manhunt, and we saw his big boot print on a table where he had gone above the door and in through the transom to access the camp. And so from then on, I was pretty fascinated with it. And then I was working as a reporter for the Post-Star, and I mentioned it to the crime writer. He didn't want to do it. So one of the editors suggested I write about it. And we wrote a 6-day series that ran from October 1st to October 6th in the fall of 2000, and became a pretty big hit in the area. Went on to win a few awards, and it was sort of like War of the Worlds in the sense that some people were calling in wondering if Garrow was still loose and alive. Mm-hmm. Although he'd been, dead for several decades.
I remember that as a kid. A lot of people aren't familiar, but Robert Garrow came to light in the Adirondacks when he came upon a young group of campers. One of the kids was from Schenectady, or they all might have been from Schenectady. Can you pick up on the story then as to what happened when he came upon their campsite and the quick follow-up as it unraveled in the Adirondacks?
Sure. There had been a rare murder in the town of Johnsburg on July 14th, 1973. And all police had was a dead body, a locked car, and a missing girl, the girlfriend of the young man who was killed. And this went on for about 9 days, and police really had no leads. And on Sunday, July 29th, Robert Garrow struck in the town of Wells, not far from Johnsburg. He had stalked out a couple that were camping up there, and he approached their tent. He untied the strings to the front of it and opened it, and told the couple he wanted to siphon gas, and if they go along, they wouldn't get hurt. At the same time, 2 other men that were friends that were camping with this couple arrived at the campsite to see what was going on. They had been fishing, and so Garrow had now had to deal with a young woman, and three men, and he had this all planned out. He marched them up the road near the campsite. It was a private campsite. They were the only ones there. He tied them all to trees, and then his plan was to kill the 3 guys and take the girl. And as he was killing the first guy, Philip Dombluski, an 18-year-old Schenectady resident, he lived on Chrysler Avenue, graduated from Mount Pleasant with honors. As he was killing him, the other kids were able to get loose, and he caught one of the kids, David Freeman, and but a third kid, Nick Fiorello, was able to run away and get in his car and go get help. And so on the morning of Sunday, July 29th, 1973, a massive manhunt began looking for Robert Garrow, who was, also very highly suspected of the Weavertown murder 9 days before. The circumstances were exact. And this manhunt went on for 12 days in the Adirondacks. And if you ask people today, a lot of them will tell you it was all summer, because that's what it seemed like. And they're truly convicted that this went on all summer. But it was 12 days, 12 long days. And anyone who lived in the area remembers how long it took to catch him. And a lot of people didn't believe that he was still in the Adirondacks because police were having trouble catching him. But the state police investigator, the senior investigator who was head of the manhunt, he issued he made an issue of no capturing the Garrow alive, because they wanted to know where the missing girl from Johnsburg was. Mm-hmm. Figured he had her in a hunting camp. Garrow was a psychopathic rapist. So that's what delayed the manhunt. They didn't tell the public they weren't going to kill him. But that was, McCabe said, I don't want any weekend warriors shooting at this guy. We have to find out where this missing girl is, and maybe other girls. So it lasted a long time. The biggest fluke of the manhunt was after Garrow left our camp, he walked up the road to a Christian boys camp early in the morning called Deerfoot Lodge. And he found a car, 1968 Pontiac Tempest, and it had the keys in it, and it had a wig in it. And he took that and he went north towards Indian Lake and up Route 30 and jumped the roadblock. Two troopers pursued, and their car broke down. A fan belt broke, and they pulled to the side. And transmission on the radio was so bad in the mountains that one of them had to walk a couple miles to a phone booth to report it, and they weren't even sure it was Garrow, because no cars have been reported stolen. And later that afternoon, I think the wig threw him off too. Later that afternoon, a young man who was a camp counselor, 21-year-old Sam Hadley from Ohio, he was a counselor at Deerfoot Lodge. He reported that his car was stolen, but he hadn't checked it since the night before, so he had no idea it was stolen. And what happened was the police got a call from a woman in North River who ran a gas station. Her and her mom owned the gas station. Her name was Betty Baker, and the locals called her Betty the Bear because she always kept these long fingernails. Mm-hmm. Betty called police and said she was sure that Garrow had gotten gas at her station. And that was on Monday, August 6th. And in the evening, about 9 o'clock, and you had a massive parade of police cars heading out of Speculator and going to Mineville, Witherby, where Garrow had been born and where he still had family. He was, hoping they would help him. Mm-hmm. And so the manhunt shifted on Tuesday morning to Mineville. And police found his 16-year-old nephew bringing him food. in the woods, and they closed in and wounded him and took him into custody.
I want to step back a second. So a few years ago, Richard Mott and another inmate escaped, and it was the largest manhunt in the Adirondacks when they escaped from a prison 4 or 5 years ago. But up until then, Robert Garrow was the largest manhunt in the Adirondacks, correct?
Correct, and I would argue that the David Sweat and
Richard Mott, is it Mott?
David Sweat and Richard Matt, that was an international hunt. They had people from Canada and people from other states. This was strictly, the Garrow manhunt was strictly a New York State operation by the state police and forest rangers and conservation officers. So yes, Matt and Sweat was a bigger thing, but it was international. As a matter of fact, the people that killed Matt were federal agents. The state police, this was the state police's largest manhunt with Garrow, that they did unilaterally.
A couple things I wanted to hit on was, at one point, he was less than 100 feet from the roadway where the troopers and local police had gathered, and he was just in a thicket. So they didn't know he was there, but he could hear him talking in the Adirondacks, if I recall that accurately from our other interview, correct?
Yes, he basically used, to circumvent the manhunt, he basically used Route 30. He used the road as a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And he threw out the dogs by running in the streams, by backtracking, and he worked his way, I think it's about, if I recall, 21 miles northwest to where our camp was and to where Deerfoot Lodge was. Mm-hmm. So he did a lot of hiking.
Covered a lot of ground. One of the things is a lot of people listening are so young that they didn't realize that we didn't have cameras at every intersection. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have drones. They didn't have those investigative tools back then that we have now. People didn't have Ring cameras on their gas station or their homes or in their camps. So today it would have been a different story. So that's
Definitely
one of the things that was different. I want to tell people while we take a quick break here, how do they get your book? Where do they look to get Jim Tracy Sworn to Silence? Where do they get that book now?
Any bookstore can order it. Northshire Book in Saratoga has it on their shelves now. And you can order it from any place that sells books, Walmart, Amazon, basically anywhere. Just look it up and they'll be able to find it. It's also at all the libraries.
Now, before he had the murders in the Adirondacks, tell us, he had been convicted of murdering or raping young girls and a few other things. He'd actually been in prison and had gone as a child. He was in reform school, correct?
Yes, Garrow was a lifelong criminal, a psychopathic rapist, and he was in trouble all his life. Prisoners call it going on a run. They'll do their time, they'll get out, and they'll go back to a criminal activity, hoping they don't get caught. And that's what he did all his life. He, in 1961, in the city of Albany, he hit a young man. He was a star quarterback at Phillips Schuyler High School, hit him in the back of the head with a pellet gun, and raped the man's girlfriend. And he was caught for that, and he was accused of some other crimes, and he ended up getting 10 to 20 years in prison. But while he was in prison, he was basically an altar boy, perfect inmate, model inmate, and he was able to do the 10 to 20. He was able to do in six years, and he was released. And what he did was he got out of the Albany area where he was known, and he moved to another city, the city of Syracuse. Meanwhile, his wife and 2 children had stayed faithfully by his side, and they moved to from Lowville, New York, where his wife was from, to Syracuse. And they got an apartment on the north side of the city. And he went to work as a bakery mechanic fixing bread machines. And his employers gave him excellent grades, excellent reviews. He was literally the best parolee that Syracuse had. Never had a problem with him, never missed a meeting. Whenever the parole officer went to his house, he purchased a house on the southeast side, a couple of years in 1971. And the parole officer would check the house. The house was immaculately clean, a lot of food in the fridge. Kids were well dressed, well behaved, and that's how he was able to stay free. And he continued his raping. Mostly,
a couple of loose ends.
He's off.
The house in the Syracuse, right around the corner from the cemetery, is still there, and his son lives there. If that's the right house, right?
Yeah, the wife and son still live there. They never moved.
Yeah, and so interesting aside, and I'll get right to it after this. You're listening to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, Crime, and Politics meet. Our guest today is Jim Tracy, author of Sworn to Silence, The Truth Behind Robert Garrow and the Missing Bodies Case. And a couple things about this, Jim, is Ryan Laurie has set up a Facebook page that is all about Garrow, and he's done extensive research based on your book and expanded. He actually took me up to the cemetery where Robert Garrow is buried and showed me the spots where 2 of the girls were found, which is the next segment we'll be talking about. But before that, I have to, in the interest of full disclosure, I don't like to say it was a B-rated movie, but I was in a movie called Garrow, which you can get online and some streaming things. It's called Garrow. It was in 2018. Laurie Bailey was the director producer, and I played a judge who presided over the Robert Garrow case. Not my finest performance, but certainly part of history. But the Ryan Laurie website, which is about Garrow, that people can get on Facebook and become join and be a member of that, it has all these interesting details. And a couple strange things before we move on to the Sworn to Silence. One of them was that somehow Senator Ted Kennedy and his staff was involved. Can you tell us that portion of the story? Why was Massachusetts Senator Kennedy involved and his people, and what had happened?
Yeah, a very interesting political story. The young man that was killed in Johnsburg, and his girlfriend had gone missing. He was a Harvard graduate, and he and 2 friends formed a political polling company. And in the leading up to the 1972 election, they got hired by George McGovern, who was running against Richard Nixon. McGovern was a long shot. He went from the longest shot in the race to the ultimate candidate. And Nixon won by a landslide. But they thought that Kennedy would run for president in 1976. So the 3 men went to work for Kennedy. And this is one of the strange things is the young man, Danny Porter, who was killed in Johnsburg. He was supposed to go to the Adirondacks for a one-night trip with his girlfriend. Well, so when he didn't return, his partner, Patrick Cadell.
And so people know, Patrick Cadell has been a pollster for years. Up until recently, he's on shows once in a while. I think the last time I saw him was a few years ago. But he actually was a pollster, Democratic pollster, since back then, right up until 5 or 6 years ago. I'm not sure he's still alive, but
he passed away.
Yeah, but he used to be, up until 5 or 6 years ago, he was frequently on the programs. But so that's interesting. So Ted Kennedy did what to help find the murderer or the missing kid, Porter?
Well, Kennedy sent a team of his private investigators to Warren County when after Danny Porter, let me back up a second.
Okay.
Pat Caddell and 3 friends, one was the third political polling party person, and said Kennedy's executive administrator, district office in Boston, they came to the Adirondacks after the Porter's car was found, and they found the body, and they immediately became suspects. And because police had searched the road and not found Porter, and these kids came from Boston. They wanted to know where the car was parked, and they actually found Porter dead the Friday, 6 days after he was killed. And the police learned that the 2 partners each had $150,000 life insurance policy on Porter, and which equates to about $1 million today, over $1 million. So they became suspects. So they didn't arrest them. They told them just to, stay around while we investigate. And they knew they were in trouble or could be in trouble. So they called Ted Kennedy, and Kennedy sent a team of investigators to Warren County, and they hung around the Warren County District Attorney's office, listening and watching to make sure that, their kids were cleared. And the governor at the time, Nelson Rockefeller, he had also got involved, vouching for these 3 kids based on what Ted Kennedy told them.
Hey, Jim, why did they have the life insurance policy? Because that's an interesting story too, because they all had them on each other, right? Yes,
they each had $150,000 life insurance policy. What Pat Caddell told me was that after they had some success, there was a lot of movie stars that backed McGovern. Of course, liberal Hollywood backed the Democratic candidate, and Warren Beatty was a big supporter of McGovern, and Warren got to know these three guys, Caddell, Porter, and the third person, and he recommended that because of their success with McGovern that they get a life insurance policies on each other, because he thought they were going places. And he was correct, because later Caddell and John Gorham, the third partner, they ended up, when Kennedy didn't run in 76, they ended up hooking up with Jimmy Carter, and they got Carter elected. And Caddell went to work for Carter in the Carter White House. And Jimmy Carter, who just turned 100 the other day, he in his biography, he mentions Pat Caddell often.
He's getting them going. So jumping back, so what happened is Jim told you that Garrow had been injured, and in the first manhunt. So he goes to trial. He's found guilty. We're going to get back to the lawyers in a minute, but he then goes to prison. Where'd he go? Dannemora? I forgot what prison.
He went to the hospital in Dannemora. They downgraded him because he was in a wheelchair. Yeah, the hospital portion of the prison.
Yeah, so his son brings him Kentucky Fried Chicken in a basket. They didn't used to check for things. They didn't screen them, and there was a gun in it. And so he escaped. And what happened with that search and that manhunt?
Yeah. And let me back up a little bit. Garrow had convinced doctors that he was paralyzed because he had been shot in the Achilles. He had shotgun pellets in the Achilles. And so he feigned paralysis for 5 years. And in the interim, he kept suing the state for every possible shortcoming of the prison system, whether it was the food they were giving him, handicap access, which was limited in the 70s. And somebody in corrections made a deal with him. If he dropped the lawsuits, he could get transferred to wherever he wanted to go. And he wanted to go to a minimum security elderly and handicap facility in Fishkill. And they made a deal with him, and he ended up in Fishkill. And that was in February of 1978. And in September of 78, he stepped out of his wheelchair, bent the bars on the front porch of of the building, scaled a 15-foot barbed wire fence, and manhunt number 2 began.
Pretty good for a guy in a wheelchair. You're listening
Yeah.
to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. Our guest tonight is Jim Tracy. If you like our content and you'd like shows to continue, please like, share, and subscribe on Apple, YouTube, Facebook, X, and Spotify, and many other platforms. Jim, so he actually ended up shooting a corrections officer who is now a town judge in Fulton County, Dominic Arena.
Yes.
And so Dominic Arena is up here in Fulton County, still working as a town judge. So after he shot Dominic Arena, then everybody opened fire on him, and they killed Garrow in the field down there, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Right by I-84, right near the road in Beacon, New York. And the rumors were he wasn't coming out of there alive. Matter of fact, even some of the state police said that. But I was the first to interview the shooters, and they said, that's not true. We were going to arrest them and bring him back into prison. But when he shot Dominic, they returned fire, and the first reports came out that he was shot like 39 times. But he was actually hit 4 times. And so a lot of that myth we dispel in the book. We actually interviewed the shooters and stuff. They were never allowed to talk to the press, or even their names were never given, because it was such a black eye for the state that the state's most dangerous man was in an elderly and handicapped facility. Pretty smart for a criminal, for a murderer. So now let's talk about the substance of sworn to silence. So there were 2 attorneys who represented Garrow in the trial, and they, as a result, even from back in the 70s, they still use their case in law school. And a lot of it is what you've written about in your book, a portion of it that talks about it. So what happens? So he discloses something to these 2 attorneys, and you can tell it what it is. And then what happens from there, and what happens with the attorneys after this? Yes. The attorneys are a very interesting story. Their names were Frank Belgie and Frank Armony. And Frank Armony was Garrow's attorney originally, and he got him out of a couple trouble spots in Syracuse. And as this thing grew bigger, and as Garrow became the subject of a manhunt, Armony wanted to write a book, sort of like Vincent Bugliosi wrote about Charles Manson, Helter Skelter. So Armani stayed on the case for that reason. But he was a civil lawyer, not a criminal lawyer. Mm-hmm. So he begged his good friend, Frank Belgie, to help him. Belgie was a criminal attorney. He was one of the best defense attorneys in upstate New York. And so Belgie agreed to help him. And Garrow made admissions, a lot of admissions. They tape recorded him for 6 days. And he likely, according to Armani, he admitted to a lot more than what was revealed. But what he did at the time, police were still looking for the girl that went missing in Johnsburg, and they were also looking for a 16-year-old girl that was missing in Syracuse. And Garrow had told them that, yes, he took told his lawyers he took those 2 girls, raped and killed them, and he told them where they put them. And they were skeptical of the veracity of his story, so they went to look themselves, and they were able to find the 2 girls. One was in Syracuse in Oakwood Cemetery. The other was in a mine shaft in Witherby, Mineville, New York, in the heart of the high peaks of the Adirondacks. And now they had this information, and they had to find a way to disclose this information legally and ethically. And Belgie was an expert in constitutional law, and he said there's no way to reveal it without Garrow's permission, and because the crimes had already been committed. And Armani actually sought out help from a state one of the highest state of appeals, the highest court in New York, he actually sought out a judge that was on that. And the judge said that, no, you can't reveal it. You get the Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment. And so these two were stuck with this burden, terrible burden.
So many people don't know. So as a lawyer, anything your client tells you is in confidence of past crimes. If they tell you they're going to kill the prosecutor or some future crime, you're free to disclose that. But any past crimes, you can't. So
Correct.
It's real fascinating from a constitutional law perspective, as you said. So tell us how they end up kind of getting in the jam, what happens, and how they get out of it once they have this information.
Well, they came up with a plan that they would meet with the state, the two district attorneys from Onondaga County, Syracuse, and Hamilton County, and Wells, and Henry McCabe, the lead investigator, and they would turn over all their information, or well, not all of it, but the information on where Hawk and Pets were, because police were highly suspected. They knew that Garrow killed those two particular girls. The meeting, when they called for the meeting, Henry McCabe, the lead investigator, told me that they were going to reveal 3 bodies. And then when they met 3 weeks later, they only had 2 bodies. They didn't disclose which ones to them, but they said, if Garrow can go into a mental home, we'll tell you where these, we might be able to tell you where these bodies are. You might be able to solve some cold cases. And the district attorneys and McCabe told them they were nuts and that they would prosecute them if they were withholding information for this
obstructing, I think it was.
Obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
Obstruction of justice. So the deal fell through. So they remained silent with this information. And then during the course of the trial, it came out that they knew all along where these bodies were. And when that happened, when that went public, basically it became a national story, that 2 lawyers knew where 2 missing girls were, had seen them, and didn't reveal it to authorities.
And the families just wanted to know that their children were alive or dead and where they were so they could give them a Christian burial.
Yes.
And that really, it was a firestorm, and the likes of which, can you imagine if we had cable TV back then, Jim?
Oh, wow.
It would have been 24/7. I mean, it was a big story even without that, but so now what happens? They end up disclosing during trial. How did it leak out during the trial? Not leak out. What did they use to get it out?
My theory was Armani had gotten Garrow out of trouble before by bringing in witnesses that could attest to his good behavior. So Armani subpoenaed all these witnesses, his parole officer, his employer, a nun he had in school when he was in Mineville, said, he was a nice boy, he never swore. He brought all these people in to testify, and it was going to be an insanity defense that he lost his mind and killed Philip Dombluski. That's the only murder that they had enough evidence to try him on. And I think Belgie got scared. I'm positive he got scared and came up with a strategy behind Armani's back that he was going to have Garrow tell his life story and reveal 4 murders, the 4 murders that police most suspected him on, and 7 or 8 or 9 rapes. And the reason I think that he revealed it, I think he thought they were in trouble, because even a lot of their peers, legal peers, were against what they did. And the reason I say he did it on purpose to reveal this information was that night Armani attacked his co-counsel. They got into a fist fight. I got a couple of witnesses that confirmed it, and Armani wrote it in his own book about the fist fight. But I think Belgie had chickened out, and if he could reveal where these bodies were, as part of his defense strategy, that that was a way to release the information and maybe hopefully get him out of trouble. And so that's how that went. And of course, this is 1974, the trial, and attorney-client privilege wasn't. It was before all these true crime shows like Law and Order, and attorney-client privilege was not a household term. So, when he revealed this, the public went nuts, and Newsweek came to little Hamilton County in the Adirondacks, took a photo of the attorneys, Time Magazine, New York Times. So anyways, make long story short, the grand jury no-billed Armani, meaning there was no charges. And then Belgie was he was charged with
I think it was tampering for going to the scene and moving some twigs to see the body.
Yeah, he actually moved the girl's head because the scavengers had gotten to her, and he wanted a photo because the photo was proof in the plea deal plan, and he moved her head back to her body. And that was in Syracuse, and the Onondaga County District Attorney went after some obscure Department of Health Health Department law about moving the body. And a lot of legal scholars think if he had gone for an obstruction of justice, that might have been a different outcome. But Belgie was found not guilty, and they both got off the hook.
Yeah, and weren't they both brought up with bar charges and administrative charges for their licenses, and they were found that they did their due diligence and they kept their mouths shut, which they had to. But they both ended up. One of them became a severe alcoholic. Their families were harassed. They were harassed for the rest of their life because of this. Wasn't that part of the story too?
Yeah. When this was revealed, they began receiving death threats. It got so bad that police in Syracuse told Mrs. Belgie to duct tape her car doors because they were fearful that they had rumors that it could be bombed. That's how bad it was. So she had to tape her doors. If the tape was broke, she knew not to open the door and not to go in the car.
Two quick asides. So what happened to the tape recordings they made? Did they get destroyed, or does anyone know?
The pressure got so intense. Armani claims his office was broken into, and he figured it was the BCI Bureau of Criminal Investigation unit of the state police looking for any information. So he had brought the evidence to his father's house, and the pressure got so hot he destroyed the tapes, and which probably was a mistake, but because I think there was a lot more on it than the 4 murders. And but he decided to destroy the tapes and any kind of thing they had, under the pressure of what was going on.
Boy,
he found a Molotov cocktail in his yard. Somebody put a dead fish in his mailbox, meaning he's going to swim with the fishes someday.
And, it's interesting. I did go up to the mine, and the mine where the one girl was placed was within half a mile of the family house.
Yes, where Garrow grew up.
Family still living there. So I have, in the interest of it, because it's interesting aside, I have a beautiful shepherd husky that is the most tame dog. Anyone around here knows. She's at the beginning of my show. Anyone knows me, knows the dog. She's so friendly. Went up to the site to find the mine shaft and actually see it myself. And my dog went nuts The dog was growling, barking, scratching, never does that. Actually, Ryan took me up because he's got pictures from all the sites and he's accumulated for his Facebook page on Garrow. And we went up there and my dog went I've never seen her that upset. And I didn't believe in it so much before, but I believe in the dog having some sixth sense of the spirit or something. And we didn't disturb anything. We just wanted to look at the shaft, the mine shaft, and where she had been placed. And it was fascinating because it was so close to his house that he grew up in, and there's still family members living there. And so you can see that there's always a connection. The cemetery was right around the corner from the house they were living in, within
Syracuse.
Yeah, in Syracuse. So tell us, there was the rumors that there was a map that McCabe found with different X's all over it or something, and that they believed that Garrow had marked other places, either for his lawyers or the police or on his own, where there were bodies. Did they ever find any? And are there other cases that you came across that you believe and they believe might have been part of Robert Garrow's murder spree?
Yeah, I was lucky in the sense that I did the reporting back in 2000, and all these people were alive, the investigator, the lawyer, and Henry McCabe, who was a senior investigator for the BCI, who was heading up the manhunt. Anyways, they found Garrow's car. In Speculator, he had abandoned it and ran into the woods. And there was a road map in the glove compartment that was new and no markings on it. So in the rear wheel of the vehicle, McCabe found a plastic bag with another map. And this map was heavily marked with different symbols. And one of them took him right to where the young couple in Johnsburg, where the man was killed and the girl was abducted. So later on in the hospital, after Garrow was captured, they could get he wouldn't, I'm trying to think of the word.
No more interviews, right?
He wouldn't respond to any form of interrogation. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And good interrogation and tough interrogation. And the only thing he ever responded to was when McCabe walked in his room with that map, and he went nuts and started screaming he wanted his lawyer. You guys planted that. Mm-hmm. And he had his glasses off at the time, and his eyesight was poor. So, McCabe knew then that the map had significance, because all Garrow had been through during his interrogation, never uttered a word until McCabe walked in with that map that was hidden in the car. So all the symbols were in New York, except one was in Hamilton, Ontario, which is about a 3-hour drive from Syracuse. And McCabe knew nothing about any crimes in Hamilton. So he got a hold of the FBI in Warren County, the agent. His name was Hogan. And he said, "Can you check on crimes in Hamilton, Ontario? Anything, like this?" And in May, 3 months prior to Garrow's arrest, a girl was grabbed by a husky white male, middle-aged, dragged into the woods at McMaster University at midnight, and rape was attempted, but she fought the whole way and was strangled. Her name was Adele Komorowski. And, right there, McCabe knew, because the crime was very rare there, especially that type of crime. And it fit Garrow perfectly, the rope, the abduction. And there was some people that identified a husky, middle-aged white male hanging around the school that night. There was a couple of people out walking that late. And they could only get Garrow to talk about. They talked to Garrow about the vegetation in the area. Garrow knew the area, put it that way. Mm-hmm. So that's an unsolved crime still to this day. The Hamilton police say that Garrow did not do it because, one, he admitted to all his murders in court, which they believe, which is not true, and that he would have raped her, but he didn't rape her because she was fighting so bad. And there were witnesses in the area that yelled, leave her alone. So he strangled her and got out of there. So that case is unsolved. But like I said ahead of time, McCabe didn't know anything about crime, and he calls up there, and they got an exact MO that fits Garrow, and the markings right there on Hamilton. He had circled Hamilton, Ontario. He had written hashtag 13 and then a question mark. And I always assumed the question mark was Garrow liked to read the newspapers, and news like that wouldn't have got to the Syracuse papers. So I don't think he knew, who she was or what her name was and stuff like that. And the attorney actually revealed to me that a girl named Martha Allen was a victim of his. And that case is unsolved.
Where was that out of? What town was it? Syracuse area?
She was from Oneida, and McCabe always suspected that when they asked for the plea deal meeting in August of 73, and they said they were going to have 3 bodies, she was found by a passerby in Black Creek at Oneida State Campground. And so when they met, she had been found, and all of a sudden it changed to that they could reveal where 2 were.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But Armani said, he said to me years later that, when I interviewed him, what can they do to me now? He goes, this girl that was in Black Creek, that was, one of Garrow's.
How many do you think there were? How many marks were there on the map that McCabe and anyone thinks?
The forensic lab counted 27 markings. The one in Canada, and the farthest one south was, I think, Ulster County, Kingston, I think. Yeah.
Were you able to get a copy of the map ever?
No, not the actual map, but the New York State police have a Central Bureau of Records, and they recorded the whole Garrow case, and they recorded the map exactly, as it was laid out. The map was returned to McCabe, and he felt it got lost when Troop G moved from exit 17 of the Northway to exit 16. And, he always lamented not having the map. I don't think he knew that the Central Bureau of Records had kept and the entire detail of what was marked on there. And so the map physically doesn't exist, but, the recording of it does.
So
it
exists.
It wasn't McCabe that recorded it. It was, the forensic lab in Loudonville. So he suspected the markings correlated with that. And one of the BCI guys, John Wood, who was a judge in town judge in Wilton, they conceded that, they felt that the markings they saw matched up with the murders they knew of, and they felt the other markings, were other crimes he had committed.
So is there anything we got to wrap it up time-wise, but is there anything I didn't ask you about that's fascinating in a minute or two that they should know about, the listeners? I mean, there's so much to this case. I know we could go on another 3 hours.
The rest of it's in the book. The book is tremendously detailed, and a lot of the reviews I'm getting, or mostly all the reviews, are saying that we thought we knew the story from living through it or from hearing about it, but this really dispelled a lot of myths and brought in other facts. One quick note: Garrow's oldest sister, Florence, he was a second child of 6. Her daughter, who was a local girl, Sue Burns, his niece, she went to Mount Pleasant, lived in Schenectady, lived in Saratoga Springs, and eventually moved to Texas. Well, she was one of the first woman executed after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976. And she had lured a mentally challenged man from a New Jersey church retreat to Texas, and had him sign over all his money, and under the guise of love. And then her son and some friends beat him to death. And so his family member was executed in Huntsville, Texas.
There's two little side facts. Is supposedly he had a girlfriend in the Fulton County area in Gloversville.
Oh, yes, yeah.
He had a girlfriend in Gloversville. And again, it's an interesting case. I urge and encourage you to look up Jim Tracy, Sworn to Silence, The Truth Behind Robert Garrow and the Missing Bodies Case. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at any bookstore. They can order it for you, Walmart, anywhere. It's a great read. It's an easy read. And it's one of those reads, once you start reading it, you want to keep going to find out what happens next. Also, Ryan Laurie has put together a great Facebook page that deals with Garrow, and it's fascinating. He's taken a lot of the work that Jim has done is embodied in that Facebook page, but a lot of stuff that Ryan has found on his own is also in there. And as a little side note, and a little bizarre note, I was told that Robert Garrow's son, Junior, living in a house in Syracuse, has won the New York State Lottery twice. Yes. I don't know if they were scratch offs or.
No, he hit the Take 5 in 2009. And I just happened to come across his photo on the internet, holding the placard, the fake check for $70,000, Robert F. Garrow Jr. And then last year it came out, the state put out winners in Syracuse, and he hit a small lottery for like 8,000 or 9,000, but he's hit it twice.
It's still bizarre. It's so bizarre. But in any event, Jim, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. Folks, if you like this program, please go out and buy Jim's book. Look it up again. I told you where you can get it. Listen to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. If you get a chance, look up the Facebook Garrow page. It's well worth your time if you're interested in a lot of the facts about this. And please like, share with your friends, and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, X, Spotify, Apple, Rumble or Ramble. I don't know the name of it. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed our program. I know I did. And I know Jim's put his heart and soul into this for several decades now. It's very interesting history. And it really is the intersection of crime, politics, and the Constitution on this program. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim Tracy. Greatly appreciated. Have a good night. You're welcome. If you see a police officer, a fireman, EMS, public safety, corrections, probation, parole, thank them for doing their job. It's a difficult job, and it gets more difficult every day.
Yes, sir.
This has been Rich Giardino. This has been the Rich Giardino Show. Thank you.
Like and subscribe to the Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.